almost always do this. I want to introduce my family who accompanied me on this week-long journey down to the southern border. My wife over here next to the wall in blue, and our oldest daughter still at home, Susanna, and then Sophia in the orange there, and Hannah next to my wife Susan, and then my daughter-in-law Greta Pilgrim Simpson, and my son right there coming up next to him. Anyway, now Greta and William didn't join me. They prayed for us, but my immediate family still at home did, as well as my parents. But before we go further, I want to also introduce some of my staff, or actually all my staff that are with me right now. Kathy C., who's been greeting you as you come in the blue. And then my legislative director, Michael Bullock, in the back. And then Sharon Guthrie, district director. And then Mickey McFall as an intern who's working in the local district office as well. And y'all may give me the credit when I do things right, but it really goes to them and to the Lord. And I'm very thankful for their support. We did have a wonderful week on the border, but it was also sobering. My staff was with me for one day, and my family was with me for the whole trip. We're going to try to move through these slides. There are a lot of them. So some of them we're not going to take a lot of time on, but I'm going to work through. This gives you a little overview. We had 2 official briefings with the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Customs and Border Patrol in Weslaco. We had 3 tours of 3 different facilities from the Customs and Border Protection in Weslaco and McAllen and Del Rio. 1 tour of a short-term shelter and foster care contractor in Los Fresnos that's contracts with the United States Office of Refuge and Resettlement. That's what ORR stands for, and also licensed by the state of Texas Family Protective Services. I had about 24 or more informal interviews, and we traveled over 800 miles on and by and sometimes in the Rio Grande. If you look down there in the bottom right, you'll see that we started our journey really in South Padre. I left my family there the first day because we were going to spend that all day in meetings, and I didn't want to drag them there. I left them to enjoy the beach. We got there late on Monday, June 30th, enough to dip our feet in the water, and then the next day I got up early, and I headed to McAllen, or actually Weslaco. But you'll see there, we journeyed not only to McAllen and Mission, but on up to Laredo, and then to Del Rio, and on over to Marathon, just north of the Big Bend National Park. And then we stayed in Lajitas, and then finished our trip on the border in Presidio. And by the way, you can stop me. I'd welcome questions, but I am going to give plenty of opportunity, I trust, at the end to hear your concerns and answer the questions that I can. And but the first one is give a report of what we saw, what we learned. But if you have something about this present slide, feel free to stop me and ask. But I'm going to just move through this. Really covered this. We started on Monday, and we went down to South Padre, got there late. The next morning, I left my family on the beach about 6:30 or so, and then we traveled over to the Department of Public Safety's headquarters in Weslaco, and they gave us a tour by helicopter and in a boat on the river. And then we were briefed by the Customs and Border Protection Agency in Weslaco as well, and had that tour in Los Fresnos. But interesting enough, the first significant interview, or maybe the second, the one that I'll give you. I was concerned a little bit about security, and I went into a little convenience store to maybe scrape my sticker off my car. I didn't ultimately do that. But in doing so, I met a clerk, and she was a first-generation American citizen. And I just tried to interview her right there as I was checking out, and she was more than willing. And to summarize what she says, stop the freebies and help us out, sir. That's how she closed it, the interview. Anyway, I don't have time to read you all this. I'm going to put this online so you can read this. You probably can't read it all there. But one of the things she said, she didn't feel it was right. She said that my kids can't receive all these benefits. I don't qualify for them. She grew up on the border. Her parents had come from Mexico. She was a legal citizen. She was working hard with her husband to try to make a living. Then there in the third bullet point, she said, the ladies come and they have 2, 3, 4 kids. They're set. They're set money-wise. They're set food stamp-wise. They're set insurance-wise. They get it all free, and we're paying for it. So she was really frustrated. She wasn't angry. She was compassionate, but she was concerned that the people were coming and taking advantage. And she talked about, in the end, that unless we solve the birthright citizenship policy that was really established in former days for slaves, and it's been interpreted and applied to those coming here into the United States, unless we change that, she said they're going to keep coming. Anyway, that was the first. Well, I don't know what happened there. Here we go. Hold on a minute. Okay,
I kind of wish it's how it is.
All right. Here we go. I didn't want to show her face, and I didn't even want to tell what store she worked for. But those are her words. I then arrived at the DPS regional headquarters in Weslaco, and that was a picture of it from the air. And we were briefed by the regional commander, Jose Rodriguez, and Representatives Lucio and Munoz, who are from that region, joined me, and very gratefully they set up this meeting and really the rest of the events of the day. I just want to make a few notes in this briefing. It lasted about 45 minutes, but here are a few significant comments. It said, in addition to its troops patrolling the border, the roadways, DPS utilizes aircraft, helicopters, and of course armored boats even now on the river. And this sector of the state has the highest number of criminal pursuits in the state. They do work with and complement the United States Customs and Border Protection Agency, and they work well with them, but they are facing some serious challenges. And note on the first bullet point on the right side, the feds, they noted, have thresholds for prosecuting human smugglers. They have to have at least 6 to 8 to really pursue it, or they consider it not worth their time. And thankfully, and this shows the part the state is stepping up to and playing, the DPS and the local law enforcement are prosecuting in those cases in many instances. They also noted that we have limited access to federal wildlife refuges which dot the Rio Grande. You'll see the map of that in a moment. And then those protected lands are not allowed to break branches, and they have to use ATVs. Another point they made, that the border is much less secure here in Texas than it is in California and in Arizona. Sorry about that. We tried to fix that problem earlier, but apparently we didn't. I need to move faster. Okay. Anyway, is that, no, it didn't show up yet. Sorry about that. here. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to try not to dwell so long. I think we're there. Okay, anyway, the sum of this is that Texas, per border mile, is receiving about half the resources as California and Arizona. So that's one of the problems that we're facing. Next thing we did, they took us up in a helicopter. Here were our pilots. And the first thing you note when you get up in the air is that there's lots of agricultural land along the Rio Grande. And it extends north a good ways into the state. We're actually almost on top of the river at this part. The left side is Mexico and the right side is Texas. A second thing you note is there are large population centers in both Mexico and Texas. On the left is Reynosa and the right is Hidalgo, Texas. Here's a closer up view of Reynosa. And the Hidalgo port of entry, which leads to US 281, one of the primary routes that many of the people come up into the state. Anyway, you can see there how developed and dense the population is there, even in Mexico. Another thing you'll note is there are lots of access points to the river on both sides, especially I was looking at Mexico. There's recreational areas, boat ramps, parks, houses, cabins, and you'll see more of that. And on the south side, or the lower part of the picture, actually the north side of the river, that's Texas. You see that Border Patrol unit traveling down one of the many roads there, keeping patrol. Another thing that I noted was the location of the border wall and fence. If you note here, it's logical, but you don't really see it until you're in the air. The wall is not on the border. The border is in the river, and the deepest part of the river in most instances. So that's impossible to put the wall there. But but they don't even put it next to the river for a number of reasons, which we won't get into. But the wall actually divides private property owners' property, makes it difficult to access it. Also makes it an easy refuge for those who do come across the river, a place to hide, and a difficult place for law enforcement to see that they're there. Here is a view of a water intake structure. This was water is used from the Rio Grande to irrigate the farmland. I believe it's also used for potable water after it's treated. And this is a point the DPS troopers pointed out was a very common area for illegal crossings. This is a view of the same intake facility. You can see it farther from the west there. Another thing you'll note, though, is there are large peninsulas, so to speak, that reach into Mexico and into Texas, because the river is full of bends and curves. It's an old river, and it's not as simple as our maps would make it, traveling just from the southeast to the north, or from the northwest to the southeast. And this picture, you'll note that, where's the United States and where's Mexico? It's difficult to tell. The immediate foreground in the lower left corner, that's the United States or Texas. The other side, where it has a little bit of green and it's cultivated land, that's Mexico. Then farther upwards in the photograph, that's Texas. And then farther in the background there, that's Mexico again, as the river winds its way back and forth. This shows the complexity of what we're dealing with in securing the border. Here's another picture of the wall. The wall, there's about 56 miles of it, but it's not contiguous. And another thing I noted was that there's lots of brush and high grass to hide in once you cross the river. You can see the Border Patrol agents patrolling those roads. Well, after this tour by air for about 30 miles from the Weslaco over to the Anzalduas Dam and Park, we were dropped off there, and we got into the DPS gunboats, armored gunboats, and we took a tour down the river. You can see Kathy and Michael there in the back if you look closely. Interesting enough, right across from where we boarded the ships, or the boats rather, was a recreational area there in Mexico. And the agents have to watch this area constantly because they'll just scoot across in a boat very quickly. We traveled up the river, and you'll see here numerous cabins, vacation houses, boat ramps on the Mexico side. One of the popular ways to cross over is on jet skis. They can do it very quickly and transport someone to the United States side. There's some motorboats and another facility. And the DPS surge has been going on all year, but it's recently been renewed, and one of our own troopers from this district I met there on the boat, and I'm grateful for his service. Here's Congressman Burgess from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex being told about this area of the river by a constable from that county. It's actually a county park where we were. You can't really see it, but right there in the middle of the screen, in the middle of the dam, you'll see the United States flag and the Mexican flag. And they have two officers sitting right next to one another operating the dam. The next thing we did is we drove from there to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Station in Weslaco, and they briefed us. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection has 40 counties which they look after, and here in Texas, 59,000 square miles. They have 9 stations and 5 different sectors: the Rio Grande Valley, where we were, Laredo, Del Rio, Big Bend, and El Paso. At the briefing there, primarily directed for the congressman, I was wondering if I was going to be able to get in and actually see the stations, but I was able to. They're very hospitable, and they gave us a good briefing. They noted that the Rio Grande Valley sector, Weslaco, McAllen, and I believe one other major, Brownsville, Mission, that area is the busiest sector in the United States. McAllen is actually the busiest station itself, and only followed by then Weslaco. They detain 53% of all the detainees in the United States. They have 3,049 agents assigned permanently to this sector, and they were asking for 700 more agents. 25% of the detainees come from Mexico. The rest of them, often referred to as OTMs or other than Mexicans, come from, of course, Central America, which we'll talk more about, but also countries including China, Syria, Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. Those were instances which they noted. So there's not been a lot from those areas, but they have had them. They do take the fingerprints of the detainees, and they check to make sure they haven't been in a battlefield in Iraq or Afghanistan or another part of where the war on terrorism is going on. They're responsible for the 56 non-contiguous miles of fencing along the border. They also employ remote video. And they noted also that California and Arizona also have a lot more infrastructure than Texas does. They seek to be primarily focused on criminal enterprises, but they've been, of course, overwhelmed with the humanitarian crisis with so many children coming from Central America. And the focus is primarily on the Anzalduas Dam south. Oh, I almost did it. Sorry. I was trying to do that. about that. This didn't happen when we practiced, but anyway, tell me I need to move quicker. Why are the children coming? 50% of the detainees are either unaccompanied children or family units. The reason why is this is the shortest route from Central America by train. There are bus routes and highways to the region. There are heavily populated areas on both sides of the border. There's lots of agricultural land, which we've noted. Interesting enough, I found this on the internet. This is a photograph of a sign at a shelter or a migrant, a poster for migrants in Mexico pointing the quickest ways to Texas. Or is Paulinique, or is that in Central America? What's it say there? Anyway, it's either in Central America or in Mexico. Here's a Google map, and if you look carefully, you can see in the light green all the different protected lands. Some of those are state parks. We have access to those, but the federally protected lands we have only limited access to. So why are they coming? Why are the children and families coming now to South Texas? Well, the primary reason that was stated there is that the violence in Central America, and they have some of the highest murder rates in the world, particularly in Honduras. There's sexual assault, not only among criminals, but even family and neighbors. There's sexual slavery. Of course, many seek to reunify with their families here in the United States, and they're seeking opportunity. They're primarily, which we'll talk more about in a minute, word-of-mouth advertising. Now, I wanted to show you some pictures that you may have seen on the internet. I was not allowed to take pictures, but I did want to confirm and try to show you what I could. This is the detention station associated with the Weslaco. Well, I don't know which one this is, but it looks like the several that I did witness in Weslaco, McAllen, and Del Rio. They're pretty much overwhelmed at times. Here you see them filing in to the rooms. They're pretty much like a county jail. This looked more like a Del Rio. In Del Rio, they only take in about, in 1 week, what McAllen takes in, or maybe a Weslaco in a day. In individual cells in which they are segregated by sex or age, or mothers with infants and young children, or they're quarantined if they're found to have disease or some medical issues. If you note there in the back, there's just a short cinder block wall that separates the room from the toilet area. And those, I believe, are water bottles on the top of it. There's about 2 square feet in most instances when they've been overwhelmed for the number of the detainees. When there's not enough room in the station while they're processing the hundreds that are coming, they leave them in the sally port. They have to sit on the concrete and lie down. In some instances, I saw mothers nursing their infants in Del Rio. So we're pretty much been overwhelmed. I do believe the Customs and Border Protection agents are seeking to be faithful and do a good job. But they've taken 40% of their people off watching the border to process these children. And one of the problems is once we process them, we don't have any place for the next step. There's only 100 beds. It's hard to believe. And they're in the northern United States for family units that are seeking asylum. So what they've been doing after we go through all this effort, we release them on their own recognizance. And they actually interpret that they're given a promise to appear, and they sign it, and they leave. But the promise to appear is like our traffic tickets. And they're supposed to go and show up in a few days or a month or a year, wherever they send them, before some immigration court. But our courts are completely even more overwhelmed than our customs stations. In McAllen, they have about 1,200 apprehensions per day over the last month. The day I went through the facility, they had a lull. They only had 500 that day, and they were surprised. Now, there may have been several reasons for that. One is they had the federal U.S. Judiciary Committee coming there, so I thought, well, maybe they shifted them to another station. I thought, the first thing I thought of was maybe the DPS surge is working. I do think it has been effective in deterring illegal crossings and criminal activity. The other thing, unfortunately, I learned about, I believe yesterday, is that there's been a train that derailed in South America with these children who ride on top of it to get here. McAllen unit has about 600 agents. We'll move on before my screen leaves me. This slide here, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. I will put it on the web. But it gives you a table of the apprehensions of unaccompanied children and family units. I combine them. Usually they're separated in the media. 20% of them generally are unaccompanied minors. About 30% are family units. And if you'll note there, in the group there, first section is Texas. And the farther northwest you go, Big Bend, Del Rio, there's not that many. Even in El Paso. But down as we get to Laredo and the Rio Grande Valley, it just explodes exponentially. At about 18,000 in the Rio Grande sector in 2013, this is the first column, and 84,000 so far this year. This was at the end of June. And I just did a little math. If you look at the second column from the right, and I'm estimating about 132,000 unaccompanied minors and family units coming by the end of August of the fiscal year, which is about a 400% increase over prior years. Another interesting thing to note is that in California and Arizona, the number of apprehensions have actually decreased. So maybe we can learn from them. Another interesting fact is that this is not a new problem. We're certainly focused on it now, and it's been occurring over the last couple of years. Our governor sent a notice to the president in 2012 about what was happening. But it did happen before. If you look, the year that spiked there towards the left was 2005. So it's not a wholly new problem. Then after that, of course, we had the recession in 2008 and 9. Perhaps there wasn't as much reason to come. This slide, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but shows the deportations from the United States from the year 2000 through the year 2013. 2000, we deported about 1.8 million people. And if you look in the first column, about 200,000, 188,000 were forced removals. The rest of them were encouraged to leave. They weren't actually forced, but apparently it was communicated and they did leave, and it was confirmed that they left. Under the present administration, you'll note that the number of deportations has dropped, not drastically initially, but significantly by the year 2013. Another interesting thing to note here is that the actual forced deportations in the first column did increase under President Obama's administration. After having the tour and the briefing by the Customs and Border Protection Agency, we went to a shelter in Los Fresnos. And there we saw, this is the place the children went to for about a week before they were reunified with families or relatives. This was run by a charitable organization that started in the mid-'80s. It contracts with the Office of Refuge and Resettlement, and they perform mental health screenings, and they contact the relatives, and they're in a pilot program now seeking to move about 200 children per week. 72 of the children while we were there were 13 to 17 years of age. 128 of them were 8 to 12 years of age. Yes. Yes, Terry.
What religious charity is it run by?
I believe this one is a Catholic charity. And it's been in place for a long time, since the mid-'80s. I thought it was the '70s, but when I double-checked it on the website, it said, I think, 1983. You can check that. It's International Educational Services. Did I miss, I think I skipped over that briefing slide. Kathy, where are you?
I'm right here.
Did I do that
On which briefing?
earlier? But I'm going to keep going.
Go, keep
Yeah.
going.
This is what this facility looks like. It's very well run and maintained. These are inside the little dormitories. They do seek to teach them English and different things. And if you'd like more information, I know a number of pastors and churches have reached out to me and asked for information about how they can help with the children, which are the unfortunately in the crosshairs of this problem. And here's some of the numbers you can contact and some of the websites, and I'll put this online. Anyway, that was just Tuesday. It was a full day.
Wow.
I got back late that night and had some time with my family. The next day we headed south from Padre and west, can't go any farther east, and went through Port Isabel, and we came to the Palo Alto battlefield, and we went down to Brownsville and then over to McAllen, which I've already spoken about, and then up into Laredo and visited the port of entry. On the way there we passed by the port of Brownsville and the shipyard. We stayed a little while at the battlefield there where there's a national park now, Palo Alto. The interesting thing, and this was sobering, a good way to start the tour actually up the river, was the first battle of the United States-Mexican War occurred there on May 8, 1846. And the result of that U.S.-Mexican War was, among other things, the establishment of the Rio Grande River as the border between the United States and Mexico. From there we went south into Brownsville. We looked at the Veterans Bridge, most eastern border crossing, and then we went by and looked at the Brownsville Gateway Port of Entry. And we have about 28 legal border crossings in Texas. You can see there, most of them there are in the valley. Here's what downtown Brownsville looked like.